Hello everyone, welcome to Model Kit Stuff. My name is Jason and yes, the weekend can officially start because Table Talk is here. Yes, hello everyone, a big warm welcome. I hope you've all had a really great week, and if you're in the UK, I hope you've had a chance to enjoy the sunshine, although I know the weather wasn't too good in other parts of the world. Anyway, we get sunshine so rarely that you have to really enjoy it when you can. And next week I'm taking a bit of annual leave. I've got a week off from work. And I'm really glad to say that most of the week it's going to be raining. We've had a really sunny, warm week this week. It's been really nice, but I've been in work, so I've had limited opportunity to enjoy the sunshine. But next week when I'm off, it's going to be raining and pretty miserable, which means we'll be able to spend lots of time on the modelling bench because we can't do anything else. So a win-win there, I think. Now then, before we get going properly, a big warm welcome to the new subscribers. Welcome to the Model Kit Stuff family. I'm sure you'll find something you enjoy here. We cover so many different aspects of modelling. We've got some bits and pieces to talk about today. What we do in Table Talk is we talk about what's going on, we talk about what happened last week, what's coming up, long-term plans, updates on builds, all of that sort of stuff, and we just keep you well informed as to what's going on so you don't miss anything and so you understand what's happening. Not that it stops people asking questions, sorry this isn't relevant, but what's going on with that sort of thing. Well, not everyone's got time to watch Table Talk, I guess. Now then, before we move on and have a look at what went on in the week gone, let's have a quick update about what's happened in the garden, because all this sunshine, boom, everything's erupting. Well, things are definitely changing in the garden quite rapidly. So here, over the last weekend, we planted 2 tomato plants, 2 different types, so we'll see how they go. And the one on the end here, I'm going to zoom you in, is round yellow cucumbers. Yep, I've never seen them before either, so that'll be interesting. Shallots are doing really well. Lots of growth on the shallots there, so happy with that. Leaves on the magnolia now. Come over here. Spinach is shooting up, and we've got some growth from, I've forgotten what I put in there, and we've got growth here as well, so we'll thin those out when they're a bit stronger and we know what's happening with those. So all good there. Rhubarb is looking really good. Someone advised I should remove the flower, so we've done that, and we've got quite a bit of new budding leaf as a result, so all good. But if you look at that, we've got enough there for the first rhubarb, and there's some flowers on our gooseberry, so that bodes well, because we got nothing off it last year. And yeah, garden's looking pretty good. Happens that it's sunny. Trying to avoid the washing. And you can see there the snakeskin plant always looks good. And then if we come to this side, runner beans, I said we plant in April, but actually we plant in May. We have first signs of onions, which is good, although nothing from other parts now. It looks quite dry on top, but you dig down, it's actually quite moist underneath, so Herbs are looking good. Planted some mint, which is also looking good and smells lovely. Reminds me of my grandfather because he had it in his front garden. Sage is looking good. Garlic's looking good. No sign of the ginger yet. And there you go. That's the garden this week. So that's the garden update. It's moved from news because news is sort of gone and we have a new QA section. So that'll be a little bit later in the video. So without further ado, let's get on and start talking about what happened last week. So we kicked last week off with a first impressions of a Stug H from Mini Art in 1:72 scale. Now this was a real revelation for me, and like I said in the video, the kit had been lent to me, and I haven't really built 1:72 scale vehicles. I mean, I have, but I used to build them in earnest when I was a youngster, and I had a great big Hornby train set set up, and that train set was running through what I can only describe as a very large diorama of a huge battle with all sorts going on. So, you know, lots of 172 soldiers of various nations on there and lots of models supporting it. It was loads of fun as a kid doing all of that and building that, and it wasn't really done with I didn't draw it out and have a vision and a map. I just got another model and decided where I was putting it. It was just pure fun. But then when I was sort of 14, 15, and especially after I started work at the age of 16 and I had some money in my pocket, then I could afford the more expensive kits that you didn't buy in the newsagents, and they were the 135 Tamiya kits that you had to go to a proper model shop to pick up. So I had to venture out of my village, Poynton in Cheshire, and go into Stockport, or even get on the train, 20-minute train journey to Piccadilly, and wander down to BT's in the Arndale Centre, or you could go down the main road from there, and there was a model shop on there which later became Games Workshop, and they had lots and lots of models. So those were sort of the areas I was going to. There was a couple of model shops in Stockport actually. The main one actually on the way into Stockport, and I know that Peter Oxley also frequented that same model shop, although probably a few years before me. So that's when I started getting into Tamiya stuff, and then I didn't build small stuff again until fairly recently, when I started revisiting one or two of the models I enjoyed building as a kid, the Matchbox ones that I could build and get hold of from a newsagents. So one or two of them I've revisited because I built them all. I very recently built the last one that I'd never built, Shah B. We built that last year. So I can now say there isn't a Matchbox 176 diorama that I've never built. And it's interesting when you look back on these kits, I actually remember the diorama bases better than the models. So I can remember the base, I can't remember what was on there or necessarily how I built it up. Part of the reason for that is I kept those diorama bases long after some of the models had been broken up and what have you. Because they were so good, I'd reuse them for other things, or and keep them for other builds. And then eventually I realised I was never going to build 172 again, and they were got rid of to make space and that sort of stuff. Which is a bit of a shame. I do wish I'd kept some of those older builds, because I had the original releases of some of these Matchbox kits with the actual swastikas and things on that later got took off. So yeah, some really fun times, and it's nice to revisit them. And I've got a few more in my stash that I plan to revisit. And with ICM bringing out Monty's Caravan, I've been thinking about maybe building the Matchbox one, because I have it in my stash. So there's always been this interest in 176 stuff, but as soon as I turned to Tamiya, I dropped it like a stone. And then I had a period of building tanks and armoured vehicles, all in 135 scale. And I did that for quite some time. And then one day I went, you know what? I'm so fed up of track links and individual tracks and all that sort of stuff that I went and built a ship again. Because I was a big shipbuilder when I was young. With the 172 stuff, there was also a lot of 1700, 1600 stuff that I was building, along with some 1350s. In fact, my first ever Tamiya model kit build was their Bismarck, which is probably the worst Bismarck kit on the market, to be honest, at that scale. And then King George, Prince of Wales, Yamato were all built. So that got me back into shipbuilding. So I never really revisited vehicles in 172. So opening up that box 35 years later and seeing what's essentially what you get in a 135 kit, just scaled down, just shrunk, was quite an eye-opener for me, and it was really interesting. I've got Lincoln length tracks. I mean, I used to build them with the rubber band tracks, and you know, and when you think about it, you'd have expected all of that to change. But you know, you've got interior details and stuff like that. It blew me away, and one or two other people from the comments were equally as impressed, surprised, taken aback, whatever that emotion was, because it was just not quite what I was expecting. I was expecting sort of 2 sprues and, you know, a little bathtub, and you put the wheels on, and then some Lincoln length track, and then you put some details on, and maybe the turret's several parts. My head was still 1970s Matchbox. So it was quite a surprise to see that huge level of detail. And it was a really nice kit. And it's given me some food for thought for the future, for the distant future. I mean, things are changing. What we do on the channel has evolved, and will continue to evolve. Basically, the channel is tracking my hobby, although I do it with consideration of the channel now, because the channel's become part of the hobby. So yeah, really interesting how that's evolved. So really interesting video, got a lot of love. It did really quite well. It started off well, and then it sort of became a bit more average, but yeah, nice little video of a lovely little kit, and that was very fun. And I do have some more unusual for this channel stuff I wouldn't normally buy and build. I do have some more of those coming along over the next few months. So that was Monday. Wednesday we did something a little bit different again, and we looked at the paint set from Vanguard Models, which I bought because I said this year we'd focus more on products and tools and stuff like that, and I'm about to have a bit of a shopping spree, so I'm gonna catch up with AK and MIG and see what they've been doing recently, and see what else we can get. So, well, you know, the main stuff we've done as they've come out. We did the big set of ICM paints. We did the AK pens. I know they brought more pens out, more for the mecha stuff, and all of that sort of thing. So some of the main stuff we've talked at, but it's now time to have another look at what else is out there and have a little play and give you guys an understanding of what you can get. Are they useful? Are they red herrings? You know, all of that sort of bits and pieces. Talking of red herrings, I'll have an update for you on one of the ships that I said I was going to build 2 or 3 weeks ago. Right then. So yeah, the Vanguard paint set, really, really nice. Now, I sort of stepped out of buying AK stuff a few years ago when they released a how to build a gas chamber diorama book, which I thought was really, really offensive and at the very least insensitive. And AK had to withdraw it from sale and make an apology and what have you, and quite rightly so. And a lot of people said I'm not using AK products again, and I was one of them. And then I've sort of slowly drifted back to some of them, you know, the pencils and the pens, and actually I've probably slowly drifted back because I felt the need to review some of those products on the channel in the past. So although the pencils was just before the channel started actually. So I am going to look at AK stuff for the full experience for you guys. But although my preference is usually the MIG products, I always find AK products a bit mixed, and there's always a tinge of business before the modeler with AK. Whereas with MIG you feel it's always a little bit more developed for the modeler rather than developed to make more revenue. I mean, obviously they're a business, they've got to innovate to generate sales and push sales, and it's why some brands like Humbrol have really stagnated, because they haven't innovated. And we'll probably come back to that later in our Q&A. Yes, we've got a new section coming along. Anyway, I've digressed again. Vanguard paints, AK paints. Haven't used those Gen 3 AK paints before, so it's a new experience for me. We will be using them soon. When we build the Grecian, we will be using the AK paint set from Vanguard. I've not ordered it yet, but I will be ordering it soon. The reason why I've not ordered it is because I have another model I need to buy from them. Anyway, we're not gonna talk about that. We'll talk about that another time. But yeah, the Vanguard paints, a really nice set. Like I said, it would be nice to have a green. You don't use the green very often. It's not really what you'd say one of the core colours, but it's quite good for mixing with the white to make some of the interior colours. But it's quite often used on the ship's boats. So you'll find that the Admiral's boat or the most senior of the ship's boats may have the green stripe rather than the blue stripe to make it stand out. So that's quite common. You'll see that if you've ever been around HMS Victory, that's the case there. So the olive green is only very occasionally used. But still would be nice to have it in the set. But I thought it was a very nice set as it was. Obviously, once you've bought the set, you're then looking for those paints to refill it as you want. And it comes in a nice presentation box. And if you're just building wooden model kits, you have a lot less stuff required than if you're building plastic. The difference between tools for wooden ships and the tools for plastic is some of the tools for wooden ships can be an awful lot bigger. So I've got saws that take up that size, but I don't use them very often because that side of the hobby has evolved so much with laser cutting and CNC machining and what have you, that you're doing less cutting out of parts and less cutting parts to length than you've ever done. But you pick up an old kit, those tools can be very, very handy. Anyway, there we go. Yeah, Vanguard paints, I thought they looked really great. I like the colours, as you saw. Then we got to yesterday to Friday. Now originally the plan was Elizabethan 4, but I didn't have enough material for that. We'll talk about that when we talk about what was on the bench this week. I was hoping I'd have generated enough, and I did generate more, but not enough to get an hour's video. And Sherborne is sort of getting ahead, so I decided we'd put another Sherborne out. So that would have been Sherborne part 17, wouldn't it? So yeah, and you can feel like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel from that video. I personally think, you know, but anyway, yeah, that was this week. So if you missed any of those, do go and catch them up. If you're one of the many people that are new to wooden modelling and have been introduced to it by my Sherborne build and what have you, do go and catch the paint set, because we will be using that paint set on the adder, which will be the 4th of our beginners builds. And I've got to say, I'm really pleased how many people have bought into this, have stuck with it, are progressing. I'm seeing some great pictures this week in the social group. Several Sherbornes looking really, really good, with deck fittings starting to go on. Someone painted, sat out in their back garden painting their cannons. I mean, that's what it's all about. And wooden modelling lends itself to that much more so than plastic modelling, to be honest. So yeah, really, really nice to see people's progress. And just as a reminder, the next ship we'll be building will be the Lady Eleanor, a fishing fife. That in many ways will be more simple than the Sherborne. Hull construction, less rigging, but we have got one or two new things. And of course she's commercial. And when you do commercial, you can have a little bit of fun in the way that you can't with military ships, because military ships are so well maintained all the time, and commercial ships, well, they're not. They're working boats, and they have maintenance windows when it's not profitable for them to be running the ship. You know, if you're fishing, there's certain times of the year when, you know, you ain't gonna get a catch. So that's when you do your maintenance. So running up to that maintenance period, it's getting scuffed about and it's not getting repainted and that sort of stuff. So only essential maintenance would ever be done. So that means we can have a little bit of fun with it. Okay, so yeah, that is what we got up to last week. So let's talk about what we got up to on the bench. So, like I said, we did get some Elizabethan done, and the main thing that you'll see is we've got the rear decks in here now, and the archers turrets there that go with it, and we've done a bit more painting, so you can see we've got the start of the chevron. So we've gone with the red and the green. I was between red and blue. I was edging towards red, but I was between red and blue, and I put it to the members in the social group, and almost unanimously people said red, which means we're probably going to do blue on the yellow. And then my thought is to use a metallic, like a silver or something, to line either both sides or one side, we'll see. But the chevron on the yellow will go in the opposite direction, and suddenly you'll think, that looks very Elizabethan. Not quite sure what we're doing with that, but probably triangles or maybe squares or a bit of both. We might have a couple of layers going on there, and we might be on Posca paint pens and stuff for that. This has all been done by paint. I haven't used any paint pens or paint markers or anything for this lot yet. So yeah, we've got a bit more painting to do before we can get the masts on, and I've got the rudder to do. We've got to gloss the base, then we can glue her on to her base, which will make things a bit more stable when we're doing the rigging and stuff. So yeah, it's starting to come together. A lot of painting work and quite a lot of masking, a lot of complex masking around all these shapes we've got to put on. So gradually getting there, but I'm on holiday next week and it's raining, so my plan is to try and finish this next week. It's not going to happen. Never happens. Never works out the way I want it to. I always imagine I can do so much more than I can actually do. And there is another pressure, and I'll talk to you about that when I show you the next build that was on my bench this week. So originally the plan was to do Elizabethan all week and then Sherborne all next week. But my mind was more Sherborne. So we've done Sherborne all week, and we're going to finish Elizabethan next week. We actually will. We're going to finish Elizabethan next week. I have also done a little bit on the barge. So the blue has had a second coat. It's not worth showing you that. So all I've got to do now is touch up the gold. All I've got to do is touch up the gold and then seal that with a varnish, and then that's the whole paintwork done then largely. We've stained some of the wooden bits darker that I want to give it a different look than straight out of the kit. Although we are going to use the natural pair for some of the wooden components. So what we've got left to do is install the wooden components into the barge after it's been varnished, and then make up the oars, and then we're done. So we'll do all that before we put part 2 of the barge out, and then part 2 will complete the build. So we'll probably try and do a bit of that during next week. So that's one of the pressures on completing Elizabethan. Don't underestimate how much effort is needed on those oars on the barge. It's a huge piece of work because you've got flat oars and you need to make large elements of them cylindrical. In fact, everything on that oar needs a bit of shaping work, and you know, it's not like you can bundle them and put 2 or 3 good ones on the top and tie them up and put them in the middle. I mean, you could, you absolutely could, but she's going to look stunning with all her oars out. I always think these things in longboats, we might talk about a longboat in a minute, always look great when all the oars are out and she looks like she's at sea, even without figures on. You know, there's something about it. You know, a Greek bream, it's just a boat. Then you put all the oars out and you see it in a museum and you go, wow, look at that. So I always think oars out is the way to go. Anyway, we ended up doing some Sherborne because we're getting towards the end of it. And as you will see, we've put the lines on here, which are basically the spar lifts. So those have been rigged up. I've done it slightly different to the instructions. Rather than tying it to the eye bolts that are in the deck, I've used a couple of hooks. So the block's on a hook, and that hook is then clipped onto the eye bolt. It's just a bit easier for beginners to do that. I mean, actually, I normally would go ahead, understand what needs to be on those eye bolts, and if it is blocks, rig them on before you install them. But we've been following the instructions because I think that's easier for absolute beginners, which is the aim. So you can see we've got shrouds on here as well. So we've got the first 2 shrouds on for each side, and then we've got the back shrouds, both of them made up. That's one of them there. coiled up, and it's got one dead eye on, and we've just got to do the measurements to put the second dead eye on. Now, some people put the dead eyes on while they think it's suspended. I don't. I'll show you how I do it. I do it a slightly different way, which I think is easier for getting the dead eyes on. And you can see these have been done, so these are waiting to be dyed now. Once we've got all 8 of these shroud lines on, what we'll do is we'll dye the little natural coloured threads so it's all black, and then we're ready for rigging them. And you can see, gonna give you a sneak peek into one of my secrets for getting the heights right. We've got a little bit of wire there which I'm using to set the height of each of the dead eyes. It's not an uncommon approach, but yeah, I've been doing it that way for a little while. When I did the Artesina Latina San Francisco 2, all of my dead eyes are at slightly different heights. I did my best to get them level, but I needed something to ensure it was level. Doing it by eye didn't quite work. Plus I wasn't tying them on the mast correctly. And that's how you learn. And you guys are lucky enough that you can take my experience and my learnings and I can give them to you, so you don't have to go through that learning curve and you get to a better model quicker. So that's a win for you. Yeah. And I've got to say, I have thoroughly enjoyed every moment of this build. Sometimes the little ships are more rewarding because you get to the end quicker. And you know what? She does look good. And yeah, I have enjoyed every moment. But we're nearly there. Shrouds, rat lines, 1 or 2 last lines to do. Put the anchors on, couple of doors. We're done. So, you know, I wanted to push it along, and with me being off all of next week, what we probably do, we'll do 4 days of Elizabethan, 1 day on the Sherborne. When we're putting the rat lines on, which are the foot ropes that go across the shrouds, that's something that I can dip in and out of. I can do half a dozen and then go and do another line and have a mental break from it. Or if I'm in the zone, I can just whip them all off. And it's quite a simple process to do them. It's just very repetitive. It's the tank tracks of wooden ship modelling. But yeah, Sherborne's looking good and we're nearly at the end. My hope was that we would finish this during April and then get on to the Fife. It's going to be a close call, but I still think it's doable. So yeah. Right then, stash ads. So last week I was teasing you a little bit saying, oh, I've got this kit and nobody knows what it is. A couple of people actually managed to work it out, so I must have flashed the side or something, or maybe from the angle they could just about make it out. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, this is the kit I was forced to buy by Jadlam. Otherwise they were going to take my points that I'd earn off me. Yeah. Okay, Jadlam, you can behave like that. It's a loss of sales for you in the long run. Anyway, M26 Armoured Tank Recovery Vehicle. Now I have built this. I built this when it first came out as the Dragon Wagon. So basically you got this and a tank transporting trailer. And it was a lot of fun to build. The trailer not so much. The cabin, yeah. I mean, it was a great model. Don't get me wrong, a really great model. I think there is a very subtle difference to this. If you look on ScaleMates, I haven't done, but if you look on ScaleMates, I've got no doubt it'll say new parts, because this was released a little bit later. What happened is they released the Dragon Wagon, which I bought and I built. Then they released the Famo Tank Transporter, which I bought and I built, and then that got destroyed, for want of a better word, by an ex-partner. And so I've never finished it effectively. And then a bit later on, this came out on its standalone. Yeah, and I think the Famo was also released, but I can't remember if the Famo came out before or after the Tank Transporter. I think it might have come out after the Tank Transporter. It might have been Dragon Wagon, Famo, Tank Transporter, then the recovery vehicle. But it will have slightly different equipment for towing a tank than you've got in the Dragon Wagon, I think. Anyway, this was a lot of fun, and at the time I built it sort of factory fresh, and I didn't bother with weathering it and what have you. And I remember finding some reference pictures online, of restorations, and they were pretty rusty. And yeah, there's some real options with it. So I'm quite looking forward to revisiting this again because it was a lot of fun. And you've got their nickel photo etch at the back, which you have to bend into the heat cover for the exhaust, and it's not easy. And I seem to think it was the first time I ever annealed photo etch. So I had to go through that learning curve. Of course, it's all stuff we know now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they've done different with the figures and the cab. Because I do remember there was a poster of a semi-clad young lady that was up in the Dragon Wagon, and there was I think a map or something that you got. Seem to vaguely remember, but yeah. Nice little vehicle. So we'll do a first impressions of this. A lovely kit as I remember it. And problem is, you need something for it to be towing. And I'm wondering about maybe building my first ever Sherman. I'm in two minds about it. I might find something else, might do a Pershing, or I could do, a German or a Churchill maybe, or something like that. I don't know, but most likely it's going to have to be German or American. I've never built a Sherman because it's such a pug ugly vehicle. It's the ugliest tank ever made. So I never really build it because I just think it's not really eye-catching and not something I want to be constantly looking at on the shelf. However, it might be okay in this sort of setting, and yeah, okay, well, there you go. That's the first stash ad. Right, before we get to this, you'll have to hold your water. Let's talk about this Agora Models. So I mentioned, I think 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, that Agora Models had reached out to me about building their first ever wooden model ship, the USS Constitution, and 1 or 2 YouTube channels have already put videos out about Pack 1. Now, as many of you know, I've got a background in the part works. I used to do some moderating for one of the park work companies, and I contributed to some of their official builds, and I know how they work. So part work companies basically work, they're basically selling magazines, and what happens is you'll quite often find that the first few issues come out and then they stop because they ain't getting sales. Well, that's deliberate. They've done a 6-part test to see how well it sells. It's part of their market research, and they never intended to do the rest of it. I mean, HMS Hood has appeared 2, 3, maybe 4 times from D'Agostini and never got past issue 3, I think, or issue 3 or 4. So it's common practice with Partworks because it's testing the water for magazine sales. Agora Models is not that same model, but sort of is. So you buy a model over 12 or 24 months, payments, which means you spread the cost. You know, if you really need to get the model and can't save up, but you don't get the magazine or anything like that. So all the cost is tied up with the model, which is better. Anyway, I'd agreed. I'd had a very brief look at it, and you know, the fact that someone was dipping their toe in the model ship world was like, you know, great, okay. So they sent me the first pack, which is what you see here. And I'm really sorry to disappoint anyone who might have been looking forward to me building the Constitution, but I've spoken to one of the directors of or founders of Gaahleri Models, and they'd given me the impression that they designed it, and I don't know exactly what the relationship is, but after my conversation and I gave her some feedback, which they asked for, they said they would speak to their manufacturer. Basically, it's not a product I'm prepared to share on the channel. I don't think they've got the product right, and I don't think it's for the modelling enthusiast. I think it's more for the occasional whimsical purchaser who will buy into it, maybe never even built a wooden model ship before, and build it. It's very reminiscent of Ochre, Artesina, Latina. I mean, it's difficult to judge from what I've got, because what I've got in there is largely just the frames. And I don't want to go into detail on why I didn't like it, but there are some issues, some more significant than others. I mean, in fairness to them, they're on the start of the journey and it's a learning curve, but someone has given them some pretty poor advice on making a quality product. Now, Gaahleri assure me that making a quality product is their primary objective. And I think there's a bit of a red herring in here. Said we'd come back to red herrings. And they've used some very specialist materials that you wouldn't ordinarily see in a wooden modern ship, and the reason is because it's not actually practical to use them, and it doesn't actually make sense. And when I've looked at what they've provided, I've gone, you know what, I don't really want people building this, so I'm not going to build it, because that's promoting it. And if I was to do a review of what's in there, I wouldn't have a lot of positive things to say, which would be unfortunate, because the model itself is okay. It's not bad. I just don't like how they've gone about it, and so I've decided it's better for me not to support it. Now, the upshot of that conversation is they have got another ship coming out, probably next year now, and you know, if I'm interested in buying that, I give them a shout. But they also said they might want to be interested, given the feedback I've given them on this, is they may be interested in me consulting for them on the next one. So I've said I'm okay to share my view, which is slightly different than consultation. I don't want someone putting me on a retainer to give them my view, because I've already got a paid job. And my view is not necessarily everyone's view. Okay, when I'm sat here in front of my camera on my channel, my view is the only thing that matters. But when I'm talking to a model manufacturer and saying you shouldn't do this and you should do that, that's a slightly different thing, because my view isn't necessarily everyone's view. But my view is, this is not for me or for my channel. What I said to Gaahleri was, my channel is for model enthusiasts, and that is not a kit for a model enthusiast, and that's where we're going to leave it. Right, now then, sticking with wooden model ships though, we have this. Now, I can't say this is the other end of the spectrum, but I'm very excited to have a look at what's going on in this. So let's talk about this. So this is the Viking ship Oseberg, and it's their version 3 model, so the most up-to-date one. And it tells you that it's for 14 years and up, and it's 1:25 scale. Now the manufacturer is Ships of Pavel Nikitin, which is a Ukrainian manufacturer. There are some, the manufacturer is putting some YouTube videos out on the build of this. You can go and see that. And also one of the bigger wooden modelling channels that I'm a member of has also done some bits on it, but typical for that channel, they've started it and not really finished it. And they've done some upgrading stuff to it, which was quite interesting. So the art number or kit number is DROS003, which is a little bit unfortunate because dross in the UK means something's not very good. But anyway, it says wooden ship model kit designed by Pavel Nikitin and Eugene Topperman. Full planking and details laser cutting. Length 860 millimeters. Width, get this, 430 millimeters. It's quite wide. I mean, you've got to remember it's a wide, low-hulled vessel for rivers, but also makes it really, really stable. And height 580 millimeters. So not a small model by anyone's standards. 1:25 scale. And this is what I love the most on here. Right at the bottom corner there, made in Europe. That's exactly where Ukraine sees itself. So yeah, now I ordered this mid-January. I got it last week, and the extended delivery time is combination of interruptions in getting some of the parts and bits and pieces, and interruptions in power in Ukraine. Power cuts, meaning they can't run the laser cutters and various other things, and so it's taken them a long time to get that out, which must be really frustrating for them. So they've got a backlog of orders and they're trying to refill them as quickly as they can. But I've had a quick look round. The quality is on the good side of okay. There's a couple of little boxes that are plywood boxes made up with a little plastic sliding lid which contains all your smaller parts, and one of those the joint popped, so floating around in here was lots of blocks and things like that. They looked really, really nice, really, really nice. There's also in here a 3D printed cooking pot, and some other 3D printed resin components, bits you can't really see on here, and a 1:25 scale Viking, who looked very, very cool. This is really heavy. It's 6 kilograms in weight. It is really, really heavy. So we're going to do our first impressions. I'll probably film it next week when I'm off, because it'll take a little bit of time. But yeah, exciting. First time I've bought one of their kits. I think they've got 4 kits out and 1 in development currently. Yeah, a lot of staining work to be done with this, because they haven't got all this dark effect by using dark woods. It's a lot of staining and paint effects, and it looks good, but that also means and you can buy the stains separately from them, but the reality is you can buy into that any way you want. You know, you don't have to do it in the sort of museum colours, which I always think that darkness is all to do with the fact it's been sat in peat for several hundred years, and probably it would have been a little bit lighter in real life. So yeah, anyway, looks like it could be a really nice model, and it's got no shrouds on it, so that's always good. So welcome to the new Q&A part of Table Talk. So last week I asked you to drop some questions in the comments so that we could launch this week. I've also asked the members in the social group for some questions, so if we ever have a quiet week, I can go back to the questions that the members have asked and put those in. But we've got plenty to start with. I might not get through all of them this week. I might move some of them till next week. We'll see how we get on. But if you've got a question, please put it in the comment below and we will answer it, whatever that might be. Now, I did mention that you could ask me what the meaning of life was, and some people got a little bit ahead of themselves and decided that they knew the answer to the meaning of life, and they all got it wrong. So let's go and have a look at the questions we were asked. So first question came from a young man called Peter Oxley, who asks, when will I be building the Jag, and with a tongue out emoji. So we know that Peter is quite a fan of the Jag. I think he might have mentioned it on his channel a couple of times. Peter, my honest answer is I don't know. I would like to say sooner rather than later, but to paraphrase another channel that I watch, life is what happens whilst you're making other plans. So we will see. So James Downing has asked two questions, and we'll go through both of them. The first question is, in the US, can people in the US join the Airfix Club? The answer is yes. They have a rest of the world option, but you don't get the pack of goodies. Now, in fairness, I call it a pack of goodies. The only thing that's really of use in there is the passport and the model kit itself. The rest of it's guff. You know, you get a badge, but it's almost the same badge every year. You get a key ring, but it's almost the same key ring every year. And you get some stickers. I don't know where they think we're going to put all these stickers. So for me, you're not missing much. The main reason to join is to get your 10% discount from the online store, and to get the Air Miles passport. I don't know if you get the Air Miles passport even for the rest of the world. I don't think they ship any of that lot out. I think you just get the 10% discount, and therefore it's a different cost, but I don't know how that equates in terms of value. I've never really looked into it deeply. If anyone else, Moz for example, knows the answer to that, feel free to put that in the comments below. Okay, and his second question is about chipping fluid. Is it best to spray it through an airbrush or brush it on? What would you clean your airbrush with afterwards? Does the hairspray method just as good? I think that's three questions really. Okay, let's deal with the hairspray method first when it comes to chipping. I don't use the hairspray method, and I don't use the hairspray method for the same reason as I'm about to explain in the answer to the first part of the question. You don't put chipping fluid on a model with an airbrush. Why not? Well, because an airbrush is going to atomize it and spread it evenly. Yeah. And what you're actually trying to do is have little globules of the chipping fluid, and I've got some to hand somewhere. Little globules of chipping fluid that you can then rub away, leaving exposed the colour that you had underneath, removing the top coat. That's the basic principle. So when you use an airbrush, you get this uniform coverage, and you can put it on thinly and then put scratches in, and it helps it remove, but it's not the best method. So hairspray and airbrush for me don't work for two reasons. One, you've got this even finish, which isn't right, and two, it's random. Chipping is never, ever random. You don't get chipping on a vehicle randomly. You get it because of an action or reaction. So it's either people clambering in and out and the paint getting chipped and worn away, or things rubbing on it. So you've got stowage tied to the vehicle that's rubbing on it, and that might rub away the paint. Or you've got stones flying up or things falling on it or what have you that might make some random chips in certain areas. But if you spray, whether that be hairspray from an aerosol can or an airbrush, you're doing it randomly and too evenly, and for me that doesn't work. And it's the classic case of somebody somewhere came up with a great idea that worked really, really well, but actually it's never really been a good solution. Lots of people jumped on it. Oh, something new. Oh, something to try. It's been in magazines, and lots of people swear by it. And for me, it's the same as over-weathering a model. It's the same as putting great big dirty panel lines on your aircraft. It's a fashion, but it's not actually getting you closer to a realistic model. So it partly depends on what your intention is when you build the model. If you're wanting to do lots and lots of chipping all over it, by all means put it through an airbrush, in which case, good luck to you. But my recommendation is put it on with a brush. You can do it in different ways. So you can dip in a toothbrush and flick it on for if you really want a sort of wide area of chipping. But your best thing to do is use a stippling brush. I've not got one to hand. It's in my weathering brushes. Stippling brush. Humbrol do some stippling brushes which are really, really good. And just put it on deliberately in the areas you want it, and then remove it, and you'll get a much, much, much better effect. So there you go. Never use the hairspray method. There's bound to be someone who goes, I use it all the time and it's great. Yeah, okay, good. If that works for you, that's fine. But chipping is not random. So the next question comes from James McKay. Thank you, James, for the question. My question for your Q&A, could you expand more on the planking fan and how to apply it on both layers of planking? Well, what I will say is, yes, we can delve a bit deeper on that on the second build when we're next doing planking. The way it works on the first planking is exactly the same as on the second planking. There is no difference to it. You're still doing measurements at every beam point. What you do is draw the line on the first planking where the beam point is, so that you can take your measurements. So it works the same. Generally, I tend to do the planking fan for the second planking only, but what we're going to do on the next build is we'll do the planking fan on the first layer as well as the second layer, because we're not going to be painting the hull. We want to have a varnished wooden hull, so you want your planking to be really good. So a bit of practice at getting your planks really good will be handy, and the way to do that is with your planking fan. So yeah, we will show you the planking fan again, and hopefully that'll explain in a little bit more detail exactly how to go about it. Phil Jolly? Nah. The number of people that think the meaning of life is 42. Nah, I actually know it. Okay, the next question is a really interesting question, and it comes from Basil Bean 5085. Thank you very much for this question. It's a super question. Let's read it. With the ongoing improvements with acrylic and lacquer paints, i.e. Gen 2, Gen 3, what's the future for enamels? Seems enamels are at a standstill. Will they have less and less relevance to the modeler with new improvements? What a really good question. And my answer is, I'll give you the short answer, then we'll explore it a little bit. The short answer is acrylic and lacquer paints need to keep evolving because they're not as good as enamel paints yet. That's my short answer. My second answer is, yeah, there is a danger that actually enamels will fall out of favour. I think that's already happened largely, and what we're seeing is a little bit of a resurgence of enamels as people are starting to realise a few things have changed over the years. So let's just explore all of that. Like most of you who are my age or older, you started out with enamel paints. It was the option. There wasn't really acrylic paints. I don't recall acrylic paints. Vallejo were the first acrylic paints I explored, to be honest, and that would have come out of seeing someone use them in a magazine. So yeah, for me, enamel paints were always the standard that you wanted to achieve. What happened with acrylic paints is, in quite short order, the acrylic paint industry, and again led initially by Vallejo, was that you suddenly got an expansion of colours, and then you started getting paint sets with colours aimed at painting faces, colours aimed at painting a Second World War German aircraft between 1940 and the middle of 1942, and you got all this specialist stuff that excited the modeler, and the modeler started going, yeah, that's great, I can buy this set and not have to think about colour matching and mixing paints, which is what you had to do with enamels because the range of paints was that much smaller. So the acrylic market very quickly was able to dominate. Now, I would argue that Tamiya was the leader in drawing people away from Humbrol enamels and Revell enamels, which were the leading two enamels. Obviously, you then had brands like Extra Colour come along, and then if you were in other parts of the world, Testers as well. And people moved to Tamiya, and Tamiya are sort of a hybrid. They're not really a true acrylic, they're not an enamel. They didn't really do the paint sets or anything like that. They were more like enamels where you got a range of colours and you had to mix. They had one or two specialist colours like their Japanese ship paint colours, but in the main they were general colours: black, white. Later on you got things like smoke and rubber black and NATO black, which is, you know, another black, and so on. But they never really did kits, and Tamiya never really explored their paint range as fully as they should have done, in my view. So because Tamiya was a bit of a hybrid, when Vallejo came along, particularly for figure painters and people doing large scale figures, they were an absolute gap in the market. And then people jumped on that bandwagon, MIG, later on AK, and they came out and they basically emulated Vallejo, and the modeler is always looking for something new. So lots of people jumped from Vallejo to MIG, and then from MIG to AK, and then some people jumped back, and some people you've got 4 or 5 different paint systems that as a modeler you're using. Now, to say that enamels didn't innovate would be untrue, because not so much Vallejo, although they have done. MIG and AK really explored going beyond just putting paint on your model, and they started looking at washes and streaking and paint effects and all of this sort of stuff to really make your model pop. And if you go back 20 years ago, they're putting publications out on how to do this, how to make streaks, how to do rust effects, how to make a wooden door look like it's never been painted in 20 years in a desert environment. They really explored every nook and cranny of the surface finish of your model. And a lot of those products that they created for doing all of these effects are actually enamels. So enamels actually progressed through things like washes and paint effects. And if I got out here, let me just get this out of my drawer. So the first one I pull out of my weathering drawer, this was next to my chipping fluid by the way, is PLW Stone, Stone Grey for Black, Panel Line Wash, MIG. And this will be an enamel. Yeah, there you go. Use enamel thinner to clean your brush. So that's an enamel. So that was the evolution of enamels. Unfortunately, Revell, Humbrol, Extra Colour have never ever explored that, and shame on them for not doing so, because their paint ranges have really died and have become forgotten because they haven't innovated like the acrylic manufacturers did. And it's a real shame, because enamel paint is still king. Now let me show you this. This is a Tamiya enamel. Most people have never used them. It's almost impossible to find them in the UK. I don't know about other parts of the world. These came from Poland. I had to get them imported in for me. They are brilliant. They are so much better than their acrylic paints. They use the same numbering system for the same colours, so you can cross-use them. So when you've got Tamiya instructions out, you can use the enamel or the acrylic. It's the same number. But they don't promote them. And I don't know why. Well, I sort of suspect to do. It's seen as a dead paint system largely now, enamels, and it's a real shame. What a lot of people have missed, I hear the same excuses over and over again, and we've challenged that on this channel before. The Christmas build 2 or 3 years ago, we built the Airfix starter set Spitfire, and we only painted it in enamels, and it was one of the best paint finishes I've ever done, and we just used Humbrol enamels. What people don't realise is that 10 years ago now, was it? Something like that, 7 years ago, a lot of the nasties had to be removed, quite rightly, from enamel paints. And the enamel paints got reformulated. And at the time there was a lot of speculation that Humbrol was ending making enamel paints and was just going to concentrate on its quite average acrylic paints. And that was not the case. They were reformulating them, driven by regulations in the European Union. But that's a good thing, because enamel paints are now less smelly than they were when I was a kid. I mean, they still smell, but not like they did as a kid, and they are nowhere near as bad as lacquers. So all these people that used to say, well, I use acrylic paints because I can't deal with the smell, and then they've gone and bought into lacquer paints and go, oh yeah, lacquer paints are the best thing since. Are they? I've used lacquer paints and they absolutely stink. And I don't see that the advantage of them is particularly a million miles away from enamel. So I would prefer to use an enamel paint. The only downside to using an enamel paint is that if you want a specific colour, you might have to mix paints, but it's not a biggie. The other advantage of enamel paints is you get better, more even coverage, and I think we've forgotten that. And what's happened, because we've bought into acrylics, we've then had to buy into all the solutions to try and improve acrylics, because acrylics aren't good enough. So you've got all sorts of things like retarders, chemical thinners, and different types of thinners. Then you've got, we've got wet palettes to stop it drying out when you're painting it. We've got all this falderel that's built up around it. Put washing up liquid in so you don't see your brush strokes. You could do all of that, or you could just buy a pot of enamel paint, give it a good stir and put it on. You know, yeah, you need thinners. You can use odourless white spirit, so you're not adding to the smell, or you can use purpose thinners, same as any other paint system. So for me, yes, I think enamel paint manufacturers do not innovate enough, and that's why they're dying off. They do not promote their products enough, and that's why they're dying off. You see in the Airfix model world, you see a little strip down the side of the page with 6 tins of Humbrol paint on, saying that the modeller's standard for 40 years. No, it was the modeller's standard 40 years ago. It's a different thing. Unfortunately, everyone's bought into acrylic paints, and some people for the right reasons. You know, they've got allergies, or even modern enamel paints would be too whiffy for them. But for me, enamel paints are the best system. And for those people that like lacquers and they've got the ventilation and they can use it, that's fine. But for me, enamels is better. They're not pre-thinned, so I can thin them to the consistency I want. Trouble with pre-thinned is, pre-thinned for the airbrush doesn't work for painting. So again, more limits. So yeah, for me, enamels is the best paint system, but only by using them, publicising them, showing them, are people going to learn that. And I try and use my enamels whenever I can. So these enamel paints, you will see them all being used on my next build that we start, which will be the Tamiya Panzer 1, new tool from 2024. We'll be painting the whole thing in acrylic paint, in enamel paints, and we'll also be doing the weathering in the same enamel paints that we painted the model with, because I like a challenge. So we're going to be exploring enamel paints. I think Gen 2, Gen 3, it's just admitting that the paint wasn't good enough first time. And if you look at Humbrol's Gen 2, that's basically what it is. We made a range of paints and they weren't good enough, so we've improved them. And if they bring out a Gen 3, it's because they admit they weren't good enough second time round. That's all that next generation means. It doesn't mean that they've come up with some new technology. It just means they've improved on not good enough before. Whereas enamels were always good enough. So I think that is enough for questions. If I haven't answered your question, don't worry. I will capture it and we will answer them next week. Okay, let's talk about what's coming up. So let's have a look at what is happening next week. So even though I'm on holiday, I'm actually trying to do some more filming and stuff next week. I'm so busy at work at the moment, I'm just not getting anything done. So the plan is we have something around a product. I'm looking at it and thinking, what's that? I'll remember when I come to edit it. It'll be in a set of videos in a folder. But yeah, we've got a product related thing. I don't think it's a product review. I think it's more of a how-to. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we've got that coming up, and if I don't like that, then it'll be a tool review that I've got waiting in the wings. And then Wednesday will be the next part of Sherborne, which will be 18 now. And then Friday should be Elizabethan back and our classic build. So that's what's coming up next week. I'll be doing more on my floaty things build, and I'll be doing more on my classic build, and I'll be doing an update video so we can all catch up with each other with the group builds. So that's what's coming up next week, plus a bit of extra modelling time, and we'll be able to talk about all of that next week. Plus I've got a very, very special Airfix model to show you next week. Cannot wait to show you. A lot of people are going to get a bit excited, I think. Right, okay, so yeah, I think that's next week. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much for joining me and keeping up with what's going on in the channel. Membership is ticking along nicely. I'm so proud of the social group. We've had no issues. It's really going along nicely. If you remember and you decide it's no longer for you, it's not an issue, but do let me know if you're leaving, just so I can remove you from the social group. And if you're changing your profile, so you're leaving and rejoining, also let me know so I don't remove you from the social group. Okay. And if you're considering being a member, it's a great place. It's basically a Facebook page where you can share your builds and talk to other people like any other Facebook page. But because you're paying channel membership, we've got a closed door policy to pretty much everybody else. There are one or two people in there who are not paying members because they're admin or whatever. It's a really nice community. You don't get all the trolls. You don't get people telling you you're wrong and what have you. It's a really nice community from all over the world. And yeah, I love it. I don't spend as much time in there as I would like because, again, I'm really, really busy all the time at the moment. Work is taking up way too much of my time. And retirement is something that's wasted on the old, I think. And I could really do with jumping in on that right now. So, here we go. End of the week. It's been a great week. The sun's been out. It's going to get all wet, which is even better for us modelers. So, whatever you're up to next week, have a great week. I will see you next week. And until next time, you enjoy your modelling. And bye for now.